Flight of the Icarus by Sean Lansendorfer. He was a long way from the jungle. Sitting on top of the world's biggest firework about to hurl you into space was just about the opposite of swinging around trees. Eating ticks off his brother's back wasn't exactly a high-risk operation. But here he was, working with the top minds on the cutting edge. It wasn't his choice to be a hero. In fact, it wasn't his choice to be shipped off to Florida, of all places. They had him cooped up in a mock-up of his home, a facsimile that had always felt off. A cage was a cage, no matter how you dress it up. It could have been worse, but that was always a flawed argument. It could always be better, though that begged the question, why wasn't it? The odd gang fights and leopards to dodge didn't make him exactly miss home, but freedom had a certain romance to it once you have someone gawking at you all day. The folks coming in to take pictures of you scratching your ass and tossing a turd must have hit every branch on the way down. What ninnies. They lived the same way not too long ago. Discovering fire sure has a way of giving a species a big head. At least he wasn't his cousin. Poor bastard was stuck trying out cosmetics in some factory for the rest of his life. Sure, he had the softest skin and he'd smell nice, but lipstick always got in the way of eating, and they never gave you the right shade. Personally, if that applies, he didn't want to complain, but still did. This gig wasn't too bad at the start. You'd get a treat for pressing the right buttons and a steadier supply of bananas than back home. Testing for G-force tolerance is when things got interesting. You went a hell of a lot faster than any vine could take you, and didn't have to worry about dodging trees. It was around the time they put the fishbowl on his head when he learned they planned to strap him to the world's biggest matchstick and see what happens to flesh and blood in the cold vacuum of space. At least there was a planned return trip. That dog in Russia wasn't so lucky. With comrades like that, who needs enemies? Cosmonaut was a cooler name, though. And that is what brings us here. Picture it. A handsome devil sitting in the cockpit of $1 million rocket in the sweaty crotch of the Americas. I'm strapped in my chair with my little suit and helmet. I knew what buttons to press the first day, but it took a bit of acting to maximize the amount of sweets I was getting. Coming up now was the real deal, and my only treat was not ending up as space debris. You could argue that science and exploration were their own reward, but I was just starting to wrap my head around using rocks to hit stuff harder, and peeling the banana before eating it. Not to sound self-deprecating, but it's hard to feel like you had a lot to do with the number crunching and the logistics of sending your hairy ass into space, when you weren't even consulted on more than what block goes in what hole. I suppose I do have a few things to be proud of. It's not every day you get to see those big fireflies up close. I'll be getting a hell of a lot closer than the treetops. And, not to sound cocky, but out of all the options, they went with me. Well, I guess the trouble of getting an elephant into orbit speaks for itself, and those big cats can't be good at taking orders. Either way, a win is a win. I'm the one going on this ride. If only my folks could see me now. They'd say, "What in monkey hell do you think you're doing in there?" And I'd shoot back with what all these hero types say for the camera. Just serving my country and doing my part to beat those commie bastards to the moon. Then I'd remind them we aren't monkeys, the same as the eggheads have to keep reminding brass. I'm an ape, and I got a name. And it ain't Bonzo, and it ain't Bubbles. I'm Elwyn, the astro chimp. Those of you who read know that that name is from an old space book that came out about 10 years back. So I've heard. Can't do any reading myself. I got the head of the whole project to thank for that moniker. But enough about that. Back to business. The door opened, and 2 people walked in. One was scribbling notes while the other grimaced and paced. "Hello, Elfin. Can you hear me?" Speak of the devil. That was Dr. Crowd or whatever. The other lab coats were always calling him this or that. He was nicer than some of the other funny-sounding ones, but not by much. You could tell there was something off about him. The gorilla duded up with the shiny bits, and the shaved head standing next to the doctor was more of an ape than I was, and high-strung. It seemed like he could only shout. It must be tiring having your chest puffed out all the time. "Why are you wasting your time, Schnitzel? The monkey is either going to burn up or drift off until space takes him." "I am aware, dear Einstein-Spinzer. We have to get our rocket up there before the communists make you look any worse." Yes, doctor, we heard this all before. But the press needs to hear a win, so the launch goes as planned, and we see what kills the monkey first. Elwyn heard every word, and it dawned on him like a leopard pounce. Project Icarus. He should have known. Those bastards planned to see if he burned up on the way, or how long it took before suffocating. That pup Leica overheated after 4 days. Would they call it a victory for the Stars and Stripes if he made it to 5? I'm sorry, Elvin. Ham was selected for the capsule test. Auf Wiedersehen, and good luck to you, my friend. 19, Kraut's parting words were cut 18, off by the countdown. It 17, was all performative anyway. 16, everyone on site knew what the good doctor 15, did during the war. 14, 13. I heard the numbers loud 12, and clear, but never knew what 11, they meant. So each one that passed 10, was another stab of terror. 9, it was going to happen. 8, and there was nothing I could do, 7, and no way to know when my 6, world was going to break away forever. 5, it was easy to think 4, of home and the simple life at a time 3, like this. It was all 2, that kept me from going mad. 1, not that it mattered. There came a roar like a pride of lions, and it was as if the sky came smashing down. Everything started shaking. This was it. I was to go out like the rocket's namesake. The rumble of the thrusters was a harbinger of the screaming tube of metal taking to the sky. Soon enough, I'd burst through that clear blue horizon, faster than any chimp has business going. We were climbing now, higher than a thing like me was ever meant to. I couldn't help but scream as my bones were compressed, but no one was listening, and you couldn't hear my cries over the engine. A loud bang as I broke the atmosphere, and another as we kissed the cold emptiness of space. The extreme thrust of a rocket gave way to freedom from gravity. The capsule escaped the threat of freefall. The blue shifted to black. I'd reached orbit. I was awed by the sights. The void's embrace was one of cold dread. There came an overwhelming sadness. To feel so insignificant against the backdrop of eternity was more than humbling. It was utterly devastating. How is this possible? The vast nothingness and all the effort it took to get me here. For what? I left paradise for this? It hit me then as the capsule drifted and the planet came into view. I was alone. I looked from my window down at the earth. Life as we knew it was down there, and here I was apart from it all. The loneliest living thing as I drifted away from that pale blue dot. Nothing but a dead dog floating by for company. A profound moment of isolation. To feel so small and know there is no hope. Just the thought of how it would end. My pod shifted, and that last look of home was replaced by a swallowing blackness. I could only whimper, even as a familiar voice came on the radio. I was too defeated to hear a word, and overwhelmed beyond thought. There was no finishing the tasks they trained me to do. Existential dread that a beast like me should never have come to understand. There was no dawn in space, no tomorrows. Anger took over. How could they do this to me? Was life just a commodity? It wasn't fair. Those hairless jackanapes were monsters. This was why we went for the face and balls first. The bastards can't push the button if you bite off their fingers. If I had the chance, I'd make them pay. Every single one of them. And as if I willed it, or there really was a chimp son of God, a hole opened up from that expanding darkness, a doorway that punched through eternity. The gauges on my console went haywire. The capsule was on the brink of failing as the pressure pushed in the metal. The whole of it creaked as the equipment blew. I looked into that swirling void of other, and my heart grew cold. I no longer cried out. My rage had turned to a honed blade. Drained of emotion, of fear, I stared into that nothingness, and it stared back. With it came understanding. As the compartment steamed and hissed, everything was pulled into that crushing force. My only thought was vengeance. Taken from my home and launched into the brutality of the Big Bang, I will return to make them answer for their crimes against me. Somehow. This is not the last they'll hear of Elwyn the Astro Chimp.